That 20 years is chronicled by Jerry Thornton of Barstool Sports in the book Six Rings, the Super Bowl history of the New England Patriots. It burns for me to even say that. And they are now out of the playoffs, so it is safe to have Jerry Thornton in on the day after, for the first time in 11 years, Bill Belichick doesn't get to play in the postseason. Jerry, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Yeah, what perfect timing.
It is.
Have a Patriots fan on. Yeah, okay, let's make margaritas out of his salty tears, why don't we?
What?
Come on, dance for us, monkey. No, now you
so,
know what it's like.
I am so happy. The Browns almost clinched last night when they beat the Giants. They almost are in for sure, and the Patriots are definitely out for sure. Maybe it was Brady who made the deal with the devil, Jerry. What do you think?
Yeah, this debate has raged around here for 20 years. Like, is it Brady or is it Belichick? If they ever parted ways, who do you think would be more successful? And I've been on Team Belichick to this point, but boy, it is not an easy stance to be taken right now, because Brady's down there living his best life. He's living a Jimmy Buffett song, He's drinking organic kale shakes under a palm tree, and he's got this Avengers of receiving targets to throw to, and we're up here living in a dystopian hellscape out of a Chekhov play.
May it go on for decades. Now, Jerry, I got to tell you, that Browns fans have a grudge against Belichick. He took my team and he drove it out of town. The team I went to every home game from 1965 to 1974, every home game till I went to college. And Belichick destroyed a franchise in 3 years. So why should anyone in Cleveland read Six Rings? I mean, everyone else in the country will want to read Six Rings, but why should any Browns fan even begin? It burns to hold your book. I'm holding it right now. It burns.
Okay, well, for starters, he was just an employee in Cleveland. I mean, you have a bigger demon to attack there, and I don't want to even say the man's name because I know
you can't. It's the name that may not be mentioned. Yeah, it can't be mentioned.
Listen, I didn't write this book just for Patriots fans. I wrote this, well, frankly, because I wanted to read this book, and the universe was taking its sweet time doing it. So I said, okay, why don't I be the one to jump on this? Hugh, I think this is a story that's fascinating. Not just if you're from New England, not just as a sports story. I think it's unique in all of American pop culture, how this institution that was the worst thing you can be in this country, which is irrelevant. For 40 years, nobody cared about them outside of me and a few other lost souls. They broke onto the scene in this kind of miraculous way. In 2001, so many things had to fall exactly into place the way they did, not the least of which was Drew Bledsoe, who was the highest paid player in football history at that point, gets hurt in a freak accident. They bring in their previous year's fourth-string quarterback, who was the 199th pick in the draft, and they went from irrelevant to America's sweetheart for a very short period of time, and then became history's greatest monsters almost overnight, and became hyper-relevant to the point where the league changes rules specifically to stop the things that the Patriots have done. There's been scandals. I just think it's an amazing, fascinating tale.
Oh, it is, because it's the infiltration of the NFL by organized crime. And I got to tell you, I was in Boston at Harvard from 1974 to 78. And I had a buddy, Mike Sawirta. I hope he's listening. They were so bad, Jerry. They were as bad as the Browns have been for the last 20 years. They were so bad. And so then this bargain with Faust, it shows up, and you begin to win and win and win. What is your mood today? You've been to the playoffs for 11 years. We haven't been since 2007, the Browns.
I don't know how to process it. Listen, I was at the game last year. I took my family, the four of us, for the first time. My sons were home, and I took them to that final game against Miami. The Patriots had a lead. They hold on to that lead. They go to the bye week in the playoffs. They were going to be the number 2 seed. They gave up a touchdown drive, and I sat there and said, I didn't know it, but that was just the teaser trailer for 2020. That was really the beginning of this dark timeline that we all find ourselves in. So what is my mood? I don't know how to process this. Again, if you remember the last time the Patriots weren't at least 9-7, congratulations, you have the vote now. It hasn't happened in 20 years.
It's an inspired very first line in the new paperback edition of Six Rings, which is a great present for anyone except a Browns fan. This is exactly what I pictured the world would be like if Tom Brady ever stopped being the quarterback of the New England Patriots. And, of course, you've got 2020 on your hands, Jerry. But I want to make sure I ask you the most important question in my prep. There are two kinds of NFL coaches. Successful and not successful. They all fall into one of those categories, successful and not successful. And they're one of those two things, and they either are good with the press or bad with the press. I think, like Charles Barkley said at Kyrie last week, part of your job is to make your job, Jerry Thornton, doable. And Bill Belichick has never cared about the media. I mean, he's been disdainful and contemptuous of it for these 20 years. How does a guy in the media who makes his bread, who keeps his family housed and clothed through talking to professional athletes, assess Belichick?
Hugh, I am proud to say that I earn my living for Barstool Sports, and we are a site of the common man for the common man. We are fans first. I know people in the media who have told me, I envy you because this is fun for you. You have a rooting interest. I don't care. I just want a good story. And I say, if that's me, if I ever get to that point, I have friends who promise they will chloroform me and put me in a shallow grave somewhere. I don't. I root. I have an emotional investment in this team. And as far as Belichick's approach, Patriots fans embrace it. We love it. It's the best. It's the most entertaining show in town. Is watching him be dismissive towards people who for years, for generations in this town, thought that they were running the show here, that they were smarter than the people that they covered. If he followed their advice, he would have been fired in 2 years, and instead of sitting on top of a pyramid of skulls of his vanquished enemies as he is.
Jerry, that's a Trumpian answer. I go back to I'm going to go back right like in the debate. Ask it again. You depend. The livelihood of thousands of people depend on coaches talking to them and players talking to them. If they all went Belichick, we'd all be out of business if you're in the sports business, right?
But it's entertainment. He's putting on a show. Everything, and this is a key part of this. As a Patriots fan, all I've ever wanted him to do is to focus on winning, not to be glib, not to be great on Wednesday press conferences. Rex Ryan was a genius at that. Just wasn't so good on Sundays from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock or whatever. And so, I find it endlessly entertaining. I mean, let's not forget some of the greatest moments in press conference history when he famously said, "We're on to Cincinnati." Well, what about your team? We're on to Cincinnati. The local media was infuriated by that. Within a few weeks, it became a rallying cry, and now it's just part of the nomenclature. Like
he changed the language.
Say it all the time.
Yeah, he changed the language, which is a very hard, big, tall order to do. And I can't tell you how many times people have said his dad coached at Annapolis. Did you know that? I don't care if his dad. I want to ask you about Six Rings, Jerry. What is the biggest revelation you discovered about? This is a two-party story. It's just like every other story. It's Belichick and Brady. What is the biggest revelation you learned in the second time you sat down? Because it's a new edition. Six Rings is new, out with a new forward. What's the second? You just redid this. What did you change or discover?
Clearly, the addition to this is that sixth ring against the Rams, one of the great performances, coaching performances of all time. I mean, Brady will always get credit for that one, but they put up 13 points in that game. Belichick came up with a game plan to stop the 11th highest scoring offense in NFL history, and not only kept them out of the end zone, kept them out of the red zone, but that bookends a journey that began in 2000 with a crazy press conference with the Jets. And, the sum total of the time that this has gone on, how this has been prolonged, what puts it in perspective, Hugh, is there's a scene, I found the clip of this, 2001 when they first won it, so we're into February 2002. Adam Vinatieri went on David Letterman, and he was wearing like leather pants and like a 90s sweater or whatever. to give you an idea of how long this has been, first of all, it's in that 4:3 aspect ratio, the non-digital TV. Letterman brought him up onto the roof of the building and had him kicking footballs into the building across the street in Midtown Manhattan in the middle of the night. And on the roof of the other building to catch the footballs was a good friend of Letterman's, a Manhattan real estate man by the name of Donald Trump.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
Imagine going back to yourself then and just time traveling and saying, hey, 2002 Hugh, it's 2020 Hugh. Vinatieri will still be in the league, and Letterman will be on this thing called Netflix. You'll find out about that. And the other, well, you just have to see about the other guy.
Well, I got to ask you to close this out. Jerry, Six Rings is in bookstores now. You can get it at Amazon in time for Christmas. The best coach of all time is Paul Brown. And the next best coach might be this guy. And I'm just curious, if you saw the Browns last night, you saw a well-coached football team, which is new to us in Cleveland. How many of these Super Bowls could have been won by the same collection of talent without Belichick?
Wow. You know what? I'm prepared to say none. I think it's
Wow.
more than any other sport. I think in the NBA, you can pretty much roll out the ball and just let your players do what they want to do. But so much of this has been schemed by this guy, the attention to detail. The Malcolm Butler play, just as an example, like they practiced that very formation in the week of preparing for the Super Bowl against Seattle. That exact play came up, and the exact coaching point that they had mentioned to him was what won them the Super Bowl. I think it's that. I think he created this culture where it's top down, but it's also bottom up, where everybody has a voice and no one cares who gets the credit. And I think that's him. And by the way, he would probably agree with you about Paul Brown being the greatest of all time.
Well, I mean, it's not a debate. It's like Jimmy Brown in the run. It's just not a debate, Jerry. But I do think there is no debate about Six Rings unless you're a Browns fan. It burns if you're a Browns fan, but if you're a football fan, Six Rings is for you. Jerry, Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining me, friend.